Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday study group where we're studying the book of Deuteronomy. We're studying Moses' final speech of his life to the Jewish people. And it's not just to the Jewish people standing on the banks of the Jordan River about to enter the land of Canaan. Moses is speaking to all of us, to all of Jewish people throughout eternity. We read from the book of Deuteronomy over and over because it's our mission statement. If we ever forget, if we ever lose our direction, if we're ever lost and we need that GPS to tune in and to tell us what we should be focusing on, what we should be dedicating our lives to, we look into the book of Deuteronomy, into these words of Moses, because they are eternal words. They talk to us every single day. It's as important to us today as it was to the Jews hearing it live from him. And where we're up to is chapter 10 of the book of Deuteronomy. And we're focusing on verses 18 and 19. I'll put it up on the screen for you so that you can just see the verses for a moment. He executes the judgment of the orphan and widow, and he loves the stranger to give him bread and clothing. Verse 19, you shall love the proselyte, the stranger, the convert, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Again, powerful words from Moses, talking to the people, telling them what to not to forget and to always remember that there is a very special place in God's heart for those that are going through difficult times. And he spells out the widow, the orphan, the poor. And then he adds the verse about there needs to be a special love that we have for the convert, for the one that joined us. Some interpretations for the stranger. And we'll get to that verse as well. First, I want to get back to the verse about the widow and the orphan and the poor, that God says, these are my people. What does that mean, my people? We're all his people. All the Jewish people are his people. All of humanity are his people. What it means is that he focuses, he has a special place in his heart for these individuals. And so when they cry, he cries. When we bring pain to them, God feels that pain. But when we bring joy to them, when we bring comfort to them, when we assist them, when we bring a smile to their faces, God has nachas from us. God's appreciative of us. He's thankful to us. A number of years ago, there was a woman in Israel. Her name was Esther. She was a mother of 3 children. She was widowed in her 40s when her husband died of a sudden heart attack. Now, even when her husband, whose name was Meir, was alive, the family barely scraped by each month. But now it's been 10 months since his passing, and she was burdened with the responsibility of supporting the family, caring for the children, tending to the house. She was completely overwhelmed, aside from the emotional pain and trauma of losing her husband at such a young age, and to have to deal with the grief of the children. So to top it all off, as if it wasn't a big enough struggle for her, one fine day, the homes, what they call in Israel, dud shemesh, that's the solar water boiler that they have in Israel, in the apartments. Suddenly it burst, and water started flooding all through the house. Now, you imagine a woman who's been widowed 10 months ago, is struggling to make ends meet, dealing with children, dealing with trying to find work, and all of a sudden, the place is being flooded with water. She was beside herself. She didn't know what to do. She doesn't know anything about plumbing. She doesn't know where the main power is to shut off the water, and the water keeps gushing into every single room in her apartment. She looked at her youngest son, Levi, who is at the time 9 years old. This 9-year-old boy had to grow up very fast since his father's passing. And with the 2 older brothers away at yeshiva, Levi became his mom's right-hand man. And she realized that she was leaning on him perhaps more than she should have, but try as she might, at times it was just too hard for her to keep her own emotions in check. And that day, with the flood coming, with the waters gushing out of her boiler, She couldn't hold back the torrent of tears that flowed from her eyes, and she just broke down. She gave up. I've had enough. I can't do this no more. I can't do life. Little Levi, 9 years old, asks his mother, is there anything I could do, Ma? And she just cried. So again, little Levi says, Ina, maybe I can call a plumber. Maybe I should call a plumber. He's a 9-year-old kid. He knows that there's such a thing called a plumber. And again, the mother is just too much in anguish to even respond. So little Levi goes to the phone book. Before we had iPhones, we used to have the old written phone pads next to the phone where we kept phone numbers. And he looks up under plumber. And he finds Uri, the plumber. Uri, he remembered, has been to the house before. He can fix anything. He sees the phone number, he dials the number, and he tells Uri, there's water coming out of the boiler, and it doesn't stop, and the whole house is flooded. And my mom is crying. Uri says, I'm going to drop everything, I'll be right over. And shortly after, Uri was there with all of his tools, and he walks into the apartment with a friendly hello, and he right away shuts off the main. He stops the stream of water coming down the hallway, and he has his boots sloshing through the water of the apartment, and he approaches the water heater. He sees what's wrong with it, and he says, first, we're going to clean up. And he begins the cleanup process, emptying the water, bringing in the fans to dry the waters, and whatever he needs to do. And Levi is watching every one of Uri's moves, curious how you fix a boiler. So he says, Levi, you want to be my assistant? He said, sure. He says, well, get me some towels. We can use some towels. And then Uri says, the water boiler is going to have to be replaced. It's broken. And the poor widow looks at Uri and says, Ein kesef. I don't have any money. I know it's needed. I know it's necessary, but I don't have it. So Uri says, no, you're in luck. You're in such luck today. You see, the municipality recently sent out these vouchers to be used to replace all these outdated boilers. You see, the municipality, the local municipality knows that all these apartments have these old boilers and they want them replaced because of exactly this. So today is your lucky day because I have this voucher. It won't cost you a penny. It's all going to be covered by the iriyah, by the municipality is covering all water boilers that are breaking this month. Little Levi hears the words of Uri and he's so happy. This is such a sweet man. He's cleaning everything up. He's fixing anything. He's coming back with a new boiler. And he sees his mother finally calming down. And sure enough, a few hours later, Uri now with his assistant comes with a new Ud Shemesh, a new solar water boiler. And they fix it and they replace it. Let's fast forward now some 25 years. Uri is now in his 70s. It wasn't easy for him to get around because he suffered from asthma and his knees gave him trouble. He wasn't able to walk around without a great deal of pain. And due to his asthmatic condition, it was very difficult for him to breathe the air in his stifling apartment. This is before they made you put on masks. His doctor said, you need to get an air conditioner. You got to get an air conditioner. You can't live in that apartment without an air conditioner. It's not good for you. But Uri felt it was a luxury he couldn't afford. As the months passed and his breathing became more labored, he realized the doctor was right. So he orders an air conditioner unit, the least expensive one available. 2 days later, the air conditioner arrives at Uri's apartment. But it wasn't the cheap model. It was the most expensive one on the market. So he asks the installer, hey, this is not what I ordered. Don't rip me off over here. I ordered the cheap one. You're going to put in the more expensive one and you're going to send me a whopping bill. Don't put anything in. He says, look, this is what my manager told me to bring here. He says, no, let me speak to him. So he gets out his cell phone, he calls the office and says, this guy's not letting me put it in. It says it's not what he ordered. He ordered the less expensive one. So the voice at the other end says to Uri, don't worry about it. It's already been paid for. Says, what do you mean paid for? Who paid for it? So the voice on the other end said, it was paid by the municipality. Today, they're having a special arrangement for those with asthma to get these beautiful air conditioners. Let me come over myself and say hello. And he comes over, and sure enough, it was little Levi, 25 years later, had an air conditioning store, saw the name, remembered the name. This was the man that was there for us. This is the man that took care of my mom when my dad passed away, when we had nothing and we had a flood. And Uri was there for us. You're going to have this air conditioner. You're not giving a penny for it. The same municipality, Mr. Uri, that paid for that water boiler. Well, when I grew up, I realized there was no such thing as any type of water boiler giveaway by the municipality. Well, guess what? That same municipality has paid for your air conditioner. We take care of our widows. We take care of our orphans. See, goodness doesn't occur in a vacuum. Every act of kindness has a way of coming back to you at one time or another, in one form or another. That's just the way it works. In fact, we're taught that in the long run, acts of ahavas yisrael, of care and of love for your fellow, and acts of tzedakah and of charity benefit the giver more than they do the recipient. Or to use the words of Ralph Emerson, he said, it is one of the beautiful compensations in life that we could never help another without helping ourselves. We could never help another without helping ourselves. Little do we know which act, which deed will impact and affect the lives of our fellow human beings and perhaps our own lives for years, if not generations to come. Moses is talking to the Jewish people before they're about to enter the land of Israel, before they're about to enter this next phase of existence as a nation. You see, in the wilderness, there was no poor. In the wilderness, God fed them all. But you're about to enter a nation. And in this nation, as a people, whether in the land of Israel or in exiles throughout history, you will face times where there will be crisis. There will be those in crisis. There will be people who will pass away early, leaving over orphans. Who will care for them? You, says Moses, you the people. You must reach out. You must care. You must take it on your responsibility that the people that God cares about, the orphan, the widow, the poor, the stranger, are on your list of concern. In 1947, you know, the year 48, of course, is the year of independence of Eretz Yisrael, of the modern day Eretz Yisrael. 1947, pre-independence Israel. What was it called then? You remember, it was called Palestine. Many Jewish immigrants from war-torn Poland and Russia were brought over, and they were coming into the Altit absorption camp. This is on the outskirts of Haifa. That's where they were coming in. Among them were many young orphans who suddenly found themselves all alone in the world, especially those coming from Europe, lost their family, lost parents, lost siblings, lost uncles and aunts and grandparents. It was what we call a churban. You know what a churban is? A total destruction. In response, orphanages throughout Palestine were scurrying to make as many beds as possible available for these children. They're coming to the Holy Land. They're coming to our land. We have to help them. We have to put them in a bed. But in 1947, poverty was so rampant in these communities. This wasn't an easy task. There was one such orphanage called Bate Avot in the city of Bnei Brak. And they would do to bring in an entire group of orphans. At the time, they didn't have any pillows or any blankets to meet their needs. The children were due to arrive on Sunday. The rabbi of the community left a message. He let it be known on Friday that everyone from the city must come to the synagogue that Shabbat afternoon for an emergency gathering. This wasn't about the prayer services. That was optional. But Shabbat in the afternoon, everyone from the city must be here. I have an emergency announcement to make. Well, word spread throughout the community, emergency announcement. Everyone is curious what's going on. Shabbos afternoon comes, the place is packed. Literally, you can't fit in. Every square inch of the synagogue was packed with people from all parts of Bnei Brak. Men, women, and children, they all came in droves to hear what the rabbi had to say. And the place was packed. The rabbi makes his way to the front of the room. He looks around the congregation and he says as follows, and I want you all to concentrate with the words of what he's trying to say. So follow me on this. He says, the Talmud says that if a person has a servant, back in the days of having a servant, or let's change it to modern times, you have a housekeeper, someone that works for you, someone that lives, a live-in housekeeper. The Talmud says you have to treat that person with the utmost of dignity and respect. You can't turn them into a slave. We don't believe in slavery. People can work for you, but if they work for you, you treat them with respect. You treat them with dignity. In fact, the Talmud says that let's suppose you have a servant or a live-in housekeeper and you only own one pillow. Jewish law says you have to give it to your worker. Your servant gets the pillow before you do. They get the pillow, not you. That's how far Jewish law went to preserving the dignity of the person that works for you. So the rabbi says, that's what it says in the Talmud, but I have a question. Because there's another piece of Talmud and another tractate that has a law that's called Chayecha Kodmin. Chayecha Kodmin means one's own life and needs takes precedent over someone else's. That you have a responsibility to take care of yourself first. Yes, you have to be charitable, but you first have to give charity to yourself. You have to take care of yourself, and then you can care about others. Says the rabbi, they seemingly contradict these two teachings. One teaching says, I come first. The other teaching says, but if I only have one pillow, the servant gets it. How does that make sense? Why should the servant get it? My life should come first. I should have the priority. I should get the pillow. The people in the congregation are trying to figure out, they were called to this emergency meeting and they're studying some Talmudic dispute between one tractate and another tractate. But the rabbi was very sharp. He says, how do we reconcile this seemingly contradiction in the Talmud between one tractate and another? And the answer is that our sages knew that a Jew would not be able to sleep at night knowing that his servant doesn't have a pillow. It's because your needs come first that the law requires you to give over to the pillow, because that's the only way you're going to sleep at night. You'll never be able to sleep with your pillow at night knowing your servant doesn't have a pillow. So do the right thing. Take care of yourself. How? Give him the pillow. Now you can sleep well at night, knowing that a person that works for you is well taken care of. They're not contradicting one another. They're supporting one another. The two tractates are saying exactly the same thing. Take care of yourself. How? By making sure the servant has a pillow. And at that point, he burst out crying. And he said, dear friends, we have a group of orphans who will be coming to our city tomorrow. We have no pillows for them. We have no blankets for them. So I'm begging you, for your sake, not for their sake, for your sake, how will you sleep knowing that these precious children don't have a pillow to rest their little kepala on, that they don't have a blanket to keep them warm after they have gone through what they have gone through? Within an hour after Shabbat was over, hundreds of men and women and even children holding pillows and blankets began lining up in front of the rabbi's house. The rabbi accepted it with so much appreciation, so much pride in his community. And he began the count of how many pillows and blankets were being brought. And then, similar to what happened when Moses told the people in the wilderness, we have enough funds to build the tabernacle, you can stop ringing. The rabbi lets it be known to the community, thank you, we now have enough. The rest of you can go home. But there was one woman who wouldn't leave. And she remained standing at the rabbi's door, pleading with him, begging him, please, take my pillow. Take one more. Maybe one of the children will want 2 pillows. And who could blame her? All this woman wanted was a good night's sleep herself. And she knew she would not be able to sleep unless she gave her pillow over to these orphans. That's the perspective the Torah wants us to have. This is what Moses is reminding our people on the banks of the Jordan River as we're about to enter into a new era. Be there for those in need. We do this for their sake, yes, but it's also for our own sake, because we know that our fates are intertwined. If my brother or sister is hurting, or if their child is hurting, how well can I sleep at night? Which brings us to verse number 19. Let's remind you what verse 19 said. Love the ger, love the convert, or some translate it, the stranger. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. A special verse in the Torah about love, about a special love for the convert. So let's begin that discussion. We'll start it today and we'll continue next Wednesday. Judaism and the convert. It's important to point out, and I've said this numerous times, and I can, no matter how many times I say it, it needs to be repeated over and over for all to remember. We, the Jewish people, do not monopolize heaven. We do not monopolize goodness. We do not monopolize God. Members of other faiths have a path to heaven. Members of other faiths can practice goodness. Members of other faiths can serve God. Unlike most religions out there, we do not say it must be our way, otherwise God will not listen to you. We do not say unless you become one of us, you'll never get into heaven, as other religions might say. We claim no monopoly on heaven. Heaven's a place for goodness, and good people go to heaven. That's point number one. Point number two, as we have been studying now for some 2 years, in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses defines the chosen people. And he defines for us, and we quoted this going back to the book of Genesis when God first meets up with Abraham. What is our purpose? To bring blessings to all the families on the face of the earth. That's our ultimate mission, to bring blessings to all the families on the face of the earth. So you've heard the expression of be a light unto the nations, the Atam Tiyuli Mamleches Kohanim V'Go Kadosh, a priestly nation. But ultimately, our purpose is to bring goodness and godliness and morality and blessings to all the families on the face of the earth. And therefore, the Torah will say, if one wants to join this mission, if they want to become part of the chosen people, there is an open door. You're allowed in. But there first must be a sincerity. And that sincerity can only come through knowledge. Do you really know what it means? Not just the title Jew, the mission of the Jewish people. And if one educates themselves to truly understand what it means to be a Jew, what is the mission statement of the Jewish people, clearly studying quite well all of the Torah, but specifically the book of Deuteronomy as we have been discussing it over the past 2 years, and begins to truly study Judaism and practice it and understand its practice and ask the question, are you sure you want this? Then they're welcomed in. You see, it's not a numbers game. Judaism doesn't proselytize. It doesn't go out there and say, we have to convert so many people to the Jewish people so that our numbers go up. It's not a numbers game. We're not in a race for numbers. Our job is to influence the world. Do you want to influence the world with these mission statements from God? Not influence the world with your own agenda. That you can do as any human being can. Anyone that wants to stand up on the soapbox in public square and talk, and today's soapbox is Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, you have the world at your hands. You can get and make any speech you want. That's not what we're talking about. The soapbox of Judaism is very clear. It's very detailed in the Torah, what it's all about. You want to buy into it? We'd love to have you. First, read it. Read what you're buying. We don't want to mislead you. We don't want to make it easy. There's some laws in the Torah that are not as easy. You need to really delve into. But if you study it and you want it, you want to join the army. So let's suppose you wake up, you want to join the army. What do? You don't wake up one day and you're a general or you're a private or you're a major. There's something called training. You want to join the army, you go through training. If during training you say, this is not for me, and many do, it's too hard for you, it's too complicated, it's not what you thought it was, that's fine. But if you go through training and say, this is me, this is my life, this is my essence, and you make determination and you go through it, not only are you welcomed into the Jewish people, you're treated by the Torah in the highest regard. You ought to be embraced. You ought to be honored. You ought to be loved. You ought to be admired. And the Torah says, you know what? Because we're all a nation of converts. Every one of us converted. When God created the world, he didn't create a Jewish people. We became part of it. At Sinai, we converted to Judaism. God asks us, do you want the Torah? We converted to Judaism. And we were strangers in the land of Egypt. And we know what it was like to be a stranger. And so the Torah will say to anyone from the non-Jewish nations, number one, no, you can serve God as a non-Jew. You can go to heaven as a non-Jew. You can practice goodness and kindness as a non-Jew. You can be holy as a non-Jew. But specifically, you decide, I have studied, I have read about the Jewish people and the mission that the Jewish people have, and I want to be part of that. Welcome. But study first. Be sincere, be knowledgeable, make this decision from a place of knowledge, from a place of education. And if you do, and many of you that are tuning in right now on Zoom or on Facebook or later on YouTube, who are converts yourself, Judaism looks to you and admires you. You are our hero. Whenever the sages want to point to a shining example of Jewish womanhood or self-sacrificing devotion to the higher things in life, whenever the Torah wants to use an example, or Judaism wants to use an example of loyalty, of modesty, of excellence in character, they speak of one person all the time. They speak of Ruth. And Ruth is connected to the holiday of Shavuot, which is the next holiday on the Jewish calendar. The strange thing about this great woman is that she wasn't a Jew by birth. In fact, She was a Moabite princess. She was brought up in a palace. Moabite of all nations. That was an enemy of Israel. That's where she was raised. Yet perhaps in this fact lies one of the most important lessons that we can learn from Ruth. By her own strength of character, by her own genuine love for the Jewish people, by her love of Torah, she became one of the greatest Jewish women of all time. And if you want to know who Ruth is, she is the ancestor of King David. King David came forth from her. She lived long enough to see David born. And from King David comes the ultimate Mashiach. Mashiach will be a descendant of King David. So you've heard the song, We Want Mashiach Now. You've heard so many songs and talks and lectures and classes about Mashiach coming to redeem the Jewish people and redeem the world. Who is this ultimate Mashiach? A descendant of Ruth, the Moabite princess, who chose Judaism, who chose Torah, who chose the ways, the Jewish tradition, and wanted that to be part of her life. How did it come about that this princess of this not so friendly neighbor of Israel became this prime example of both Jewish womanhood and prime example of what it means to be a convert? Well, it's a nice story. I'll give you a week to do your own research. We'll come back next week. We'll tell the story of Ruth and the story of another character named Onkelos. Onkelos was from a different royal family, from the Roman royal family. And he too became a convert and one of the greatest teachers of all of Jewish history. So we'll start next week focusing on this theme of the convert to Judaism. We'll tell the story of Ruth, the story of Onkelos, and then look at this verse from another perspective, that the verse is not just talking about the convert to Judaism, but to the immigrant, to the stranger, to the one that's not from your community, from the one that feels like they're on the outside. This is a nation of immigrants. I sit here as the son of an immigrant. My father was in exile, so to say, after running from the Nazis, and luckily made his way to Japan at first, and then from Japan to Shanghai. And there he waited for a visa to be able to immigrate and to come to this country. Were it not for the fact that this country opened its doors, and we wish they would have opened their doors years earlier, it would have saved many lives, and we wish they would have allowed many more in years earlier. That's a separate story. But the very fact is, I owe my life to this country welcoming my father into this country. And not being treated as that stranger, but being taken care of, being welcomed in by this nation, by what was then called the Joint, which is now called the Jewish Federation, that cared for the immigrants that were coming in, the orphans that were coming in. My father came to this nation as an orphan, a lone survivor of his entire family, with no parents, no uncles, no aunts, no grandparents, and no siblings. How did he make it? People saw this verse in the Torah. Take care of the orphan. They took responsibility for the orphan. The Chabad Yeshiva literally adopted him as one of their children. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe was like a Zaidi to him. In fact, we found, I'll talk about it in more detail at another time, but we found in my parents' house, my mother still lives there, she should live many, many long, happy and healthy years, but we found put away in my father's closet a box of postcards that he received from his father during the war. At different stations where he was running to, he managed to communicate. And these postcards tell a story of what life was really like up close for these youngsters that were trying to survive and trying to make it to the shores of this country. But in all of these postcards, they needed to speak in code because the Nazis were reading every postcard and they were censoring them. They were throwing most of them out. These postcards, we actually see the Nazi stamp. The swastika is stamped on it, which meant it passed approval. So they had to speak in code. And any reference in these postcards to the grandfather is referencing the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The grandfather told me. The grandfather said, the grandfather is helping me. People reached out and took these orphans in and made them part of their family, part of their lives. And we, their descendants, are forever grateful. So when the verse talks about, be kind to the immigrant, be kind to the stranger, it speaks to so many of us who benefited from that act of chesed, from that act of tzedakah that became part and parcel of the identity of the Jewish people for thousands of years. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Have a good Shabbat. Monday night at 7:30, we study biblical literacy. We're studying the stories of the book of Genesis, and I look forward to continuing this discussion with you next Wednesday at 12:30 as we delve into these few verses of the book of Deuteronomy. Have a wonderful week, everybody.